So let's talk about the elements. The periodic table of the elements is, I consider it like a library of the elements. So it contains all of the elements, and they are organized by what we call the atomic number. So each element has its own atomic number. In the future, we'll discuss the meaning of this atomic number and how we can how we can use it to help us understand some things about the elements and bonding as well. Now, also, along with an atomic number, each element has a name and an abbreviation of that name, which is called the symbol. So, for example, carbon has a symbol C. So sometimes the name of the element is very directly related to its symbol. Other times we can have things like gold, which has a symbol of AU. Now those the name and symbol don't seem to match, but it's because oftentimes a symbol may come from a Latin name, for example. So just so you know that. Then in terms of the symbol, if there's only one letter, it always must be capitalized. So for example, carbon is a capital C. But if the symbol has two letters, the first letter is capitalized and the second letter would be written as a lowercase. As a part of this course, I have you memorize the names and symbols of elements with the atomic numbers 1 through 36 and element 53, which is iodine. Now, what I'm asking you to memorize is not any of the numbers or the locations on the periodic table, but I want you to know, for example, if you have the name sodium, the symbol would be Na. Or if you're given the symbol Zn, then you would know the name is zinc. So I'm just asking you to know the name and its related symbol. Okay, you do not need to know what the atomic number is for that element or any of the other numbers that are in the periodic table. And we will be, like I mentioned previously, discussing what those numbers are and actually using them quite a bit to solve problems. So here's a practice. Now on the exam, I will not be giving you multiple choice. It will be, I'll give you a name and ask you to write the symbol. Okay, but for example, I would pause, read the question, and then I'll give you the answer. So the answer to this is letter B. That's the symbol for carbon. Ca is calcium. Cu is copper. And CO is cobalt. I picked all these C's in this multiple choice question just because it's easy to, there's a lot of them. So it's something we need to realize, okay, I got to practice. Now here's another example where you're given the symbol. Again, on the exam, it's not multiple choice, but just for our purposes. So pause the video, try to answer this question. So the symbol of Na is sodium. Sulfur has a symbol of S. Nasturtium is a type of plant, so I just tried to think of a word that sounded kind of sciencey, that had an Na to start with. It's not an element at all. So if you're like, what was that one? Although in the lower parts of the periodic table, there are some that have kind of unusual names. And the neon symbol is Ne. Now, the elements, just so you know, can be found in nature or they can be synthesized. In many of the periodic tables in our classroom, the elements that are synthesized, instead of having a solid symbol, their symbol is outlined. So after element 92, which is uranium, all of those elements are man-made, which is synthesized. Currently, there's 118 elements known. Since everything after 92 is man-made, I suppose they could keep going. You do not need to memorize how many are synthesized or how many are man-made. This is really for context and for understanding the origin of some of the elements. Up to uranium, there's two that are commonly synthesized, which is, I think, promethium and technetium, those two. So there are some before 92, which is uranium, which are synthesized, but basically up to 92, the majority of those are found in nature at some level. And then another thing, and again, I won't ask you the number, but the majority of elements are in the solid state at 25 degrees, which is close to room temperature. It might be a little warm for room temperature, but it is around room temperature. So the majority of the elements are solids, followed by gases, and the gases are predominantly on the right-hand side of the periodic table. And then there's two common liquids around 25 degrees. We have bromine and mercury are the two that form liquids. Again, if you look at the periodic table in the room, they often are color-coded. I know the most common ones we have in the classroom, the solids have solid black symbols. The gases have solid red symbols, and the liquids have solid blue symbols. So you don't have to memorize those, but I want you to know in general that the majority of the elements are solids, followed by the liquids on the right, the gases on the right-hand side, and then very few are liquids. If you change the temperature, you would change the state, right? Because we know that from previous discussions that changes in temperature can bring about changes in state. You don't need to know anything on the next two slides. I personally, as I'm learning, like to have some context for some things. And so we look at the periodic table, and it doesn't give us an idea about the distribution of the elements. So I just have a couple of examples where we can see the distribution. So this is a slide from a different text that I have that just is talking about the crust, water, and atmosphere. And we see if you just take those things on the Earth into account, there's actually 10 elements that make up 95% of all of those three things: the crust, the water, and the atmosphere. So we see that the distribution of the elements is not equal. We can do the same thing if we just look at the human body and think about the elements. And you might have learned some of these things if you've already taken anatomy and physiology. But the elements that make up 96% of our body are carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen. These are the elements that are found in our big biological molecules. You can see here protons, carbohydrates, lipids or fats, and nucleic acids. So just to give you an idea, so ourselves, distribution of elements aren't equal. Again, I'm not going to ask you to memorize this. I just want to give you context, because as we move forward and just start talking about reactions, we don't really talk about the availability of the elements, but kind of trying to understand some processes and transformations. I always like to look here, especially too, because a lot of the elements that you're learning the names and symbols for are some of our major minerals and our trace elements. So you may be surprised to know that some of those elements on the periodic table that you might not have thought of are actually important for healthy human functioning. All right, so I thought I had one more slide, but I don't here. So this will conclude our introduction just to the elements. The major thing I want you to get out of this is to know that elements are organized by atomic number, as well as to start that process, if you haven't already, of memorizing some of those names and symbols.